Hello again. This week we are going to look, I'm afraid, again at caddy spoons. But there is a reason for it. Now, not that long ago, about a month, there was a big private collection of caddy spoons that came onto the market, about 300 or 400 of them. And I bought 3 and I showed them to you and I was delighted. And I did think that would be all the caddy spoon buying I would be doing this year. But a lot came up at a little auction not far from me, and it enticed me with 2 phrases. The first was white metal. So it was a white metal caddy spoon. This is it. I did buy it. And the second was with indistinct marks. So that is a red rag to a bull, I'm afraid. Now, the first thing, because this was the first image I saw of it, is you've got this very flat, very loose, bright cut engraving. Now, I've seen enough provincial silver in my time to know that that is not a London style of engraving. That has been done somewhere provincially. And initially I looked at it and I thought, well, it's probably Newcastle, which would be very interesting. Could even be Exeter. But I asked for a picture of the marks, and these are the indistinct marks. Now, I think you'll agree you can see those from space. They are fantastic marks, and they are actually Scottish provincial. It's Edward Livingston of Dundee. Now, over the last 25 years, the market for caddy spoons has been very much going downwards. It's picked up in a couple of years ago. It started to pick up again, but certainly 25 years ago, there would have been a bun fight to get hold of that. Firstly, let me say that Scottish provincial caddy spoons from the 19th century are rare. Livingston, in this case, was working at the end of the 18th century, from the 1780s up to about 1820. This would have been made about 1785, 1790. This is an 18th century Scottish provincial caddy spoon, and a genuine one. People have faked these. The fakes, as you will go back and see another quick video of mine, will always have a join here where they've been made from the stem of a teaspoon and then a bowl added on. But actually genuine ones, you can see this is all one continuous piece of metal. And most importantly, the stem, because it's a shorter spoon, they flared it out a bit more than a teaspoon. So that's the key thing that tells you everything is tight and right with this. So I was, I broke convention, and I thought, well, I will buy more caddy spoons, and luckily I did. And whilst it was not inexpensive, unfortunately, I don't think anyone really twigged how rare it was. And if you go and look after this video and try and find 18th century Dundee caddy spoons, genuine ones, you probably won't. So that was the white whale that I landed. The fact that it came with another caddy spoon, I couldn't have cared less. However, when they arrived, and I cleaned this one up carefully and was delighted to find it wasn't a fake, it wasn't damaged, it was in perfect condition, fabulous. Crack open the champagne. I was equally, if not more, delighted by this, and for 2 reasons. Now, the first thing, it's never great with filming, but this is a normal size caddy spoon. That's what a sort of late 18th, early 19th century caddy spoon is normally the size of. Can you see? Much smaller. It's sort of half to 2/3 the size. It's a sweetie. It's made in Birmingham. Lots of caddy spoons of this period, the late Georgian period, are made in Birmingham. It's the great manufacturing centre of the British Empire. They're fairly turning them out. This is enormously light gauge. I mean, I haven't weighed it, but it don't weigh much. However, look at the decoration in the bowl. And this is the thing I found quite charming. It is all pierced open work with a naive representation of a flowering tea plant. How appropriate, how wonderful. And the stem, beautifully but simply bright cut engraved, and lovely clear marks on the back. Might do all of that in close-up just so you get an idea of it. It did, however, lead me to pose a question, which I hadn't before. I just hadn't bothered. Why are most caddy spoons solid bowled? Most of the caddy spoons you'll see will have a solid bowl. A few Birmingham examples, particularly of this period, this early 19th century, late 18th century period, will be pierced, or they will be solid with bright cut engraving but have little filigree panels inset to them where they can have a motif or simply be scrolls. But again, that offers a piercing. And I thought, how strange that I'd never thought about this before. So I went back to this. Do you remember this? You've seen this before. This is my fantastic, amazingly fantastic Britannia Standard moat spoon. And we call them moat spoons, but really we shouldn't, because they are the first true caddy spoons. These weren't made to this wonderful standard to occasionally lift a tea leaf floating out of your tea. They were made to take tea out of the caddy, and the perforations here originally were to allow dust or sediment, when you got your tea there, to filter out, because the leaves were quite large leaves. Now, at this period, we're looking at the beginning of the 18th century. Most tea, all tea came from China. Most tea was green tea at this period. Green tea and black tea. The difference is really how they're treated, how they're processed. The black tea is fermented and dried. The green tea is just dried. It's lighter, it's more natural, and it tends to be a larger, or certainly at the period, a slightly larger leaf. Now, the thing you didn't want to do when you're serving tea, because it was hideously expensive, it was a great social show when you were doing it, and you didn't want bits in your tea when you were serving it, and that would have been beyond the pale. So you had these perforations to take the tea out and remove any impurities. And my goodness, there were lots of problems with impurities. Tea was so expensive that sometimes impurities crept in there deliberately. So little bits of dust, little bits of whatever got in, and they bumped up the weight of the parcel of tea, which of course increased the profits of whoever was selling it. So you had this practice of just gently tapping the leaves, and anything that might have been unpleasant would have fallen away probably into the spoon or the slop tray. Then you would have served your tea. And then, of course, if you had a bit in your cup, you could still use that to scoop it out and still use the end to unblock. So that's why they were pierced. As the 18th century went on, the British developed more of a taste for black tea than for green. Black tea was served basically with sugar. Sugar became more readily available in the middle of the 18th century, and it was served with milk or cream. So it became the choice. And black tea was slightly finer, slightly denser. And that's when you start to get solid bowled caddy spoons. The two teas still exist together. Often in a tea caddy you will have B for boa or black tea and G for green tea on another caddy. You see that quite often throughout the 18th century. So they were still served in tandem, but there was a preference, there was a British preference towards black tea against green tea. And I think that these little early 19th century Birmingham pierced caddy spoons were for those that still wanted large loose leaf green tea and just wanted to maintain, possibly practically, possibly as an affectation, the practice of just knocking away any dust before they put it into their caddy. So actually, when you look at caddy spoons, Georgian caddy spoons, and we're talking from about 1770 up through the 1820s, These pierced ones are very uncommon. And that specifically relates to how much green tea we were drinking, not very much, to how much black tea we were drinking, quite a lot. So this is your caddy spoon for black tea or for green tea if you're not fussy. If you don't have that hangover from the moat spoon, the first caddy spoon. But if you are particular, you might request a pierced one. So that is the reason for that decoration and for the filigree set panels in these spoons. The other thing about this is the diminutive size, I think, reflects the fact that certainly at the end of the 18th century, beginning of the 19th century, when you went on a visit to somebody, and I don't mean a day trip out, I mean coach and horses, taking you for several days to visit a distant relative for the season, you would bring them a gift. And the gift could take any form, any sort of gift that you wanted. But often it was a quantity of tea. Firstly, because you'd be drinking tea whilst you're with them, and it was still relatively expensive, although prices started to go down at the end of the 18th century. And also, you would present it in its own little tea caddy. Now, and tea caddies are a perfect gift for someone to keep afterwards. So it's a bit like, and I know this is stretching it, it's a bit like getting a Stilton cheese at Christmas, but instead of just a block of Stilton, it comes in its own little pot, and then someone gives you a special cheese knife and a cheese board to go with it. And you go, oh, isn't that a wonderful gift? In that same respect, the tea that you presented, it might be a sealed pound of tea, because it was a very keen thing to have sealed tea from particular stockists to show it wasn't adulterated, but it could be put in a little presentation caddy, and you could even include a very light, very inexpensive silver Birmingham caddy spoon as a keepsake. And then, of course, whilst the tea would be consumed and your gift would be gone, it would remain there with the caddy and the caddy spoon forever after. So your host would always think of you when they served up their tea, or they might think, didn't she drink a lot of tea? She should have bought 2 pounds of tea with her, not 1. But that is the joy of that. It's a little bit of social history, but it is a beautiful bit of small Georgian silver, but perfectly executed, and it tells a tale, and it does relate back to these earlier moat spoons. And if you have a strong belief that these aren't the first tea caddy spoons, you can always debate it with me, but I think most right-thinking people now regard these as the earliest form of tea caddy spoon. Although when we say tea caddy spoon, we really do think of something like that. So those are 2 wonderful bits of silver, wonderful for different reasons. Joseph Wilmore's quite a common maker, but that is just a sweetheart of a spoon. And as I say, try and find another 18th century genuine Dundee tea caddy spoon, and you will be hard pressed, and you might be frightened at the prices even now, even though they've plummeted for caddy spoons, which actually means it's the perfect time to start collecting them. But don't let me influence you, please. Anyway, that's all for this week. A couple of little caddy spoons and a story. Next week, something else, unless I can't find anything, and then I'll probably just talk to you for 5 minutes and say goodbye. But until then, good antiques hunting, and goodbye.